I will share this with you, that we have to run the ball better, and not even better. We have to run it more and more and more and more and more.
Welcome to this podcast. Rob Staton and Robbie Williams with you. The Seahawks season is over, but there's still an awful lot to talk about. So we're going to jump on here and just get through a whole bunch of topics. The only place we can start really is the departure of Brian Schottenheimer, who's left the team. They released a statement, which Adam Schefter also kind of reiterated, saying that it was kind of a mutual parting. That philosophical differences or whatever it was that they describe it as. Since then, so in the subsequent 24 hours, we've had this report from Jason LaCamfora, who says that I'm told things finally fell apart between Carroll and his offensive play caller during the season review meetings, which is what teams have at the end of the year before they all disperse around the country. When it was clear their philosophies as to how to write an offense that went south in the second half of the season were far apart. The mandate was essentially to find ways to keep pounding the rock, and a change that was not originally planned went down quickly. So based on that report, there was no intention to fire Brian Schottenheimer. It wasn't that Carroll was planning on getting rid of him and bringing somebody else in. They had a meeting. They talked through the ways that they were going to get this offense back on track next season, and they simply disagreed. We heard what Pete Carroll wants to do next season, which is to run a bit more, but to run effectively. It's not just about running 50 times a game, he said. He just wants to run more effectively, but essentially they want to run the ball more. That's the focus for next season. And Brian Schottenheimer clearly doesn't want to run that kind of an offense. This is a man who has got ambitions of being a head coach, that doesn't see this as the route to make that a reality, and thinks that he's better off going and getting a job somewhere else. Simply put, Schotty doesn't want to run Pete's offense anymore. So what are the Seahawks going to do next? We're going to talk about potential replacements in a moment. What's your reaction, though, first of all, Robbie, to this big news this week?
Yeah, I mean, at first I was excited because I honestly didn't think Shotty was going to get let go. I thought if anybody, it would be Ken Norton was going to go, and then we would still have Schottenheimer for next year. And I think it was even the day before he actually got let go, Pete had said, Brian's not going anywhere. So for me, it was kind of a surprise. And initially I was kind of excited, but then the more I kind of started reading into it and what people were saying and how Pete was, wanting to, run the football more effectively and those kind of things, I kind of like, oh man, I wonder, I'm not excited about the names that I've heard come out yet, but I don't really know enough about them to be to really pass judgment. But I can tell you that in my mind, Shotty's offense was just it just plays took too long to develop. When his passing plays, it felt like, it just was taking way too long. Russ wasn't getting the ball quick enough. We didn't have any plays for, third and short or, third and 4, no play to go to for a guaranteed first down. It felt like everything was a struggle. So, I mean, ultimately, I think this is the right decision. It's going to be tough to see, the repercussions of what happens with Russ. I think this is kind of what people are talking about now is what happens now with Russell Wilson? Does he, demand a trade? My guess is he'll probably sit this year and play with the new offensive coordinator and see how it goes. And then, if things don't go well and we end up the same exact boat next year, I think we'll probably see a different scenario with Russell.
Yeah, I want to talk about Russell. I think Russell is a big part of this, and I want to get onto that in a little while, Robbie. I'm very much like you. When I saw the news, I thought, well, I'm not tied to Brian Schottenheimer in any way. I wasn't hoping that he would stay or anything like that. Equally, I wasn't necessarily, I didn't think that he was the most important individual. I think it's a rung up the ladder. It's Pete Carroll. That is where I would point the finger at the problems are at. So really, whether the coordinator changed or not was neither here nor there. But then as time goes on, I'm concerned by this, Robbie, because this to me is quite clear. Schottenheimer is no longer here anymore because Pete Carroll is hell-bent on doing what he wants to do. And Schotty wants to do something else. But Pete Carroll's not willing to do anything else. He just wants to do what he wants to do. And the reason that Schottenheimer's gone and the reason that Ken Norton Jr. is still there is because Ken Norton Jr. is a yes man. He will do whatever Pete Carroll wants him to do. It's as simple as that. There's no pushback there. When Carroll was asked by Michael Sean Dugar last week, I think I'm pronouncing it right, he was asked, who keeps you accountable, Pete? And the two people that he listed were Brennan Carroll, his son, and Carl Tater Smith. I'm sorry, they're not keeping you accountable, Pete. Your son is not keeping you accountable. You may well say that they tell you stuff that you don't want to hear. I'm not buying that for a second. as a dad, that is where you get your accountability from. And I'm worried about this. Do you know what, Robbie? The best leaders know how to delegate. We saw one do it this week. Nick Saban at Alabama has handed off the offense to a series of high-profile coaches with NFL experience, and they win and win and win. Offense isn't Nick Saban's strong point, but it's the strong point of everybody he brings in. And, there's one guy he had is going to be a head coach in the NFL next year, who's having a great year with Josh Allen. He's got Steve Sarkisian, who's moved on to Texas. He's bringing in Bill O'Brien. They will just keep going and going and going. That's delegating. That's completing the circle that Pete Carroll wants to do without feeling like you've got to control everything. And this is exactly what is happening here. It's going to be more of the same. I mean, Pete Carroll is just going to go and bring somebody in who will do exactly what he wants. And within Laconfora's report, he's saying essentially around league circles, there's not a lot of excitement for this job, Robbie, despite the fact you might get to work with Russell Wilson and DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, and you've got Dwayne Brown at left tackle. The NFL's saying, not sure about this. I don't want to go and run your offense, Pete. People are saying stuff like, is it Mike McDaniels at San Francisco and Mike LaFleur, who's Matt LaFleur's brother? They're two guys at San Francisco. And there's a guy who, Shane Waldron, who works for the LA Rams. Why the hell would they want to go and run Pete Carroll's offense? They work for Shanahan and McVay. If they go to Seattle or anywhere for that matter, they want to run the offense that they know. They don't want to be told by a 69-year-old defensive coach what they're doing on 4th and 1. They don't want him meddling all the time. They want power and control. You've got to make this job attractive to people. And it's not, because all he wants, really, let's be honest, is a stooge. Somebody who's going to come in there and do exactly what Pete Carroll wants to do, which to me, Robbie, just means we're going to see more of the same from the Seahawks, which is one playoff win in 4 years against a 40-year-old Josh McCown-led Philadelphia Eagles team who won the NFC East because they were the least bad of the NFC East teams last year, much the way that Washington was the least bad this year. I'll let you, but just make this one last thing, Robbie, sorry, because I know I'm going on. Mike Tomlin said this week, I understand we better make some changes in what we do. Schematics, personnel, I'm committed to doing it. The Steelers won their division. They won 12 games. They lost in the wild card round. Mike Tomlin's saying we're changing something about this. Pete Carroll's telling everybody they've had an excellent season and more of the same will be just fine. Not for me.
Yeah, I think that's probably the thing that worries me the most is Pete, meddling with like the 4th and 1 calls and such. I mean, I'm all for a new offensive coordinator, and I don't mind running Pete ball if that's what you want to call it. I mean, I know that people are like, oh, that means you just run, but hopefully that's not what it means. I mean, honestly, what it means is setting, the run sets up the pass, and I'm okay with that as long as he has to relinquish a little bit of control and give the offensive coordinator an opportunity to, have a good play call on 4th and 1 and not, go in and try to change it. I mean, ultimately he's the head coach, and so he gets to make that decision. So that's kind of the unfortunate part about that. And then he isn't going to step back and relinquish control like we were hopefully talking about after the game. We said he needs to relinquish some control and give it to an offensive minded coordinator who's going to come in and let him do his thing. And that's just not the way it's going to go, unfortunately. And, I know that there's this young guy out of San Diego or LA, the Chargers, that they're talking about. And I don't know much about him. I can go and see how they played and such. But the reality is Pete's been to the Super Bowl twice. He knows what he thinks works, and that's what he's going to want to go with. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's wrong. Unfortunately, I just think this is the way it's going to be. And there's going to be some repercussions going forward. This is what I'm talking about with Russ. And, you're going to have problems with DK if Russ goes. And there's going to be a lot of things that trickle down from this decision.
What is happening here, Robbie, is Pete Carroll is deciding that this is the last contract. It's very likely to be the last contract of his coaching career. I mean, he's going to be, 74 when this contract ends. I think it's fair to say, it's being ageist to suggest that maybe at the age of 74, Pete Carroll will think maybe retirement is overdue. So he wants to go out doing things his way. He thinks that if he doesn't want to have any regrets, he doesn't want to turn around in 5 years and say, I trusted the wrong person or whatever. But, this is not how I cannot disagree with this further, Robbie, with this approach. What is Carroll's idea for replacing coaches? What coaches are they developing? Where does he go when he wants to bring in a new coach? I mean, it's just when they got rid of Darrell Bevel and Chris Richard, he went and he flirted with bringing Gus Bradley back, and apparently Gus Bradley preferred to stay with the Chargers. And then he went and got Ken Norton Jr. He just went to his old friends. He didn't go, there was no extensive search there. He just wanted somebody who knew what he wanted to do and would do what he wanted to do. It wouldn't surprise me if Gus Bradley didn't want to just run Pete Carroll's defense, and he wanted the control, and he knew what Pete's like, and he knew that he was going to meddle. Whereas Ken Norton Jr. wasn't going to turn that job down, was he? He was going to be the linebackers coach for the Niners. He gets to be a defensive coordinator instead, so he took the job. Brian Schottenheimer, I think, had just left Georgia or was he a quarterbacks coach in Indianapolis, or he'd been at Georgia or something? I mean, he was off the NFL radar. I mean, this was not an extensive search. This was just basically contacting one or two people who may well have given a few names, and then they just go and find someone who agrees to do what Carroll wants to do. That's not how it should be. And personally, Robbie, just this concept of, well, they're going to do more of the same. He's not going to cede any control. They're just going to carry on without any draft picks, with hardly very much money to spend, with a whole bunch of, for me, it kind of feels like we should, a lot of Seahawks fans may well be thinking this way. Let's just jack this in until September. Let's just not think about the Seahawks, not wonder what's going to happen this offseason. Let's just come back in September and watch the games, because all you're going to end up doing is being frustrated thinking about this. That this team, who, they can tell you that they're close and that this was an excellent season and that they were 12-4, despite the fact they played the NFC East and the AFC East. And, if they'd have just done this in the Rams game, they got the doors blown off by the Rams. And despite the fact Aaron Donald played literally half the game, and Jared Goff had a thumb injury, and the starting quarterback left the game, they got hammered by the Rams. And they're going to try and tell you everything. It's not okay. It's not just a case of, they need to have Tomlin's mentality of things have to be different. So I just get the sense, Robbie, that there's actually an apathy among Seahawks fans now. I didn't know what the reaction would be to the Rams game, but now I do. It's apathy. It's just a bunch of people letting out a sigh, thinking, what is there to be excited about? It's just going to be more of the same.
Yeah, and you talk about like the apathy and how people are feeling, and like, when Shotty got let go, I think most people essentially at first were excited, and then as reports started coming out and they started hearing some things, seeing who they were looking at, what Pete wants to do. I mean, even Pete said it, like, we want to run the ball more. And he's like, I know that the fans aren't going to like that. He knows we're not going to like that. And unfortunately, just going forward, Dick, all that does is now people are talking about trading Russ and trading Jamal and trading DK and all these things. And like, let's just get a bunch of draft picks and get a badass running back and a beefy offensive line, and let's just run the football because that's all we're going to do. And, I just really don't think that's going to be the case this year, but I think this is going to be a mediocre year for us. Who knows how free agency plays out and everything, but it's going to be an interesting, I think who they hire as offensive coordinator will be really, it's going to dictate what, how we're going to go forward. Like the offensive coordinator needs to have some control. I guess we'll see.
You're absolutely right, Robbie, that there was, I think, some excitement when Schottenheimer left. And if Schottenheimer had left and he'd been fired, and it was a case of Pete saying, no, we can do better at this. We can do better with this position. We need to go and get somebody now who's going to elevate this offense to the next level. That's what I think people would be very excited about that. But that's not what has happened here. I read the Lacomfora report out. They weren't planning this move. The only reason this has happened is because Schottenheimer has said, I don't want to do that. And Pete's gone, well, if you don't want to do that, then maybe we should part. And they've kind of gone, yeah. And they've parted. So now Pete's finding somebody who's willing to do what Brian Schottenheimer's not willing to do. I mean, I saw a tweet immediately when it was just kind of blowing up. Essentially what has happened here, Robbie, is Pete, not even Brian Schottenheimer wants to run Pete's offense anymore. I mean, that's just incredible. We'll talk about candidates because, as you mentioned, there's one that's emerged. There's been another couple of names thrown out. I'll come on to that in a second. But the other thing that I wanted to talk about here, Robbie, is, and I'm going to play a video in a moment. The fact Pete is doubling down on control, and you touched on it, also speaks to what happens next with Russell Wilson, the quarterback. And Mike Florio reported in May, and let's just point this out. Florio is close to Mark Rodgers, Wilson's agent. Florio has had Mark Rodgers on his show. Florio is connected to the agents, and in particular, Mark Rodgers. So this is what Florio said in May. Some who are close enough to the situation to know what may happen, Mark Rodgers, believe that Wilson eventually will be traded. Some think it's just a matter of time before he's traded by a team that talked about trading him just 2 years ago. So that's what Florio reported this year. I would suggest that nothing that has happened in the last 24 hours is going to improve that situation if Carroll is doubling down on his vision for this offense. And then today, we have this clip, and I'm going to share the screen here, Robbie, so that you can see this and that everybody else can see this, so that I can play this clip for you. Here's what Mike Florio had to say earlier.
This is why I feel like it's heading in a bad way. What I was told early in the year when we were talking about let Russ cook, it was let Russ cook or he's going to find a new kitchen. Well, they let him cook. It didn't work. And now I feel like what Pete Carroll is saying is the hell with this. We're going to do it my way. And that's going to set the stage for a potential showdown with Russell Wilson. And again, folks, we're just trying to get you ahead of the curve here as to where the ball is moving. And it may be moving in a direction of Wilson moving out of Seattle.
So there we go. It may be moving in a direction with Wilson moving out of Seattle is what he says because of all of this. So for me, Robbie, it's time to take the conversation that we had before the Rams game to the next level now, the next stage. I think we're very, very likely witnessing the beginning of the end of this marriage between team and quarterback. Because I thought that going into the playoffs, the only way that Carroll could convince Russell Wilson that this was the right way forward was if they were to win. And they didn't even win one playoff game. And it was a disaster against the Rams. So epic fail in that regard. But I also want to bring this to the table, Robbie. I don't know why Carroll would want to proceed with this either. Because if you want to run the offense the way that he does, if you are saying you want to run the ball more, the key to beating the Rams is to be better up front and to win the line of scrimmage on the O-line. If that's what you want, if you want to truly run the offense that Pete Carroll is talking about here, you need the same kind of environment that you had in 2013, which is a quarterback earning $500,000 salary because he's a third-round pick on a rookie contract. You were paying, in 2013, your offensive line was the most expensive offensive line in the NFL. So if you want to run this offense truly the way that you want, don't have a quarterback earning $35 million stood back there. Get a quarterback who can throw it and dump it down and do all the things that Russell Wilson can't do to move the chains and get your 3rd and 4 conversions and do all of these things, but take the occasional shot downfield. Invest all of your money, not $35 million in the quarterback. Invest that money in offensive linemen. Go and get Brandon Scherf. Go and sign Joe Thuney. Go and sign Alex Mack and have the best offensive line and the most expensive offensive line in the league. You want to beat the Rams up? You want to stop Aaron Donald? That's what you've got to do. Build up your defense. Have the same physical, tough defensive mindset on the other side of the ball. There's no point saying you're going to do all of these things that you want to do and then be spending $35 million a year on a quarterback who's going to perform the way that he did, Robbie, in the second half of the season. You might as well have Alex Smith back there. You might as well trade for Marcus Mariota. You might as well draft Zach Wilson or Justin Fields or Davis Mills or Mac Jones or Kellen Mond. Draft Javonte Williams to run the football. Spend big on your O-line. To me, it doesn't make sense for Wilson or Carroll to proceed together.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you on that, but I mean, if you look at it, like, let me ask you a question. Do you think the San Francisco 49ers have the best offensive line?
I don't.
And yet, what did they do to Aaron Donald? They shut him down. they've game planned around stopping them. I don't think you have to go out and have the best offensive line, but you have to game plan better. And this is the problem that I had with Shoddy, is that I felt like his game plans were just awful. And I don't know how much of that is on Pete. I mean, I don't know if they get together and Pete's like, I want you to do this. But when you're talking about they're running 2 high safeties and you can't beat that, but you want to go take shots because you want to put it to them and it's not working and it clearly hasn't worked. Why do you keep doing it? Like, where is the adjustments? At least with Bevel way back in the day, there was like second half adjustments. If we were playing terrible in the first half, you can guarantee that second half there was a better adjustment. And now I'm not advocating for Darrell Bevel. I was asking for his head long prior before you got let go. But I mean, like, there's no second half adjustments. There's no game planning. It just seems like Shoddy's offense was just blah. Like, there's no other way to put it. It was like I said, routes took way too long to develop. There was no, he had no go-to 3rd and 4 or 3rd and 7 play. Everything was just, it was like really, really tough to do. So yeah, I mean, I don't think you have to go out and do that, but if you're going to do that, like if that's what Pete wants, then yeah, go do that. Go get all these players that are going to, be monsters on the offensive line. Go get your beast of a running back and get a game manager, someone who can be a point guard for you, because that's what Russ was. I mean, and I think he has the ability to continue to do that. I think we just can't put too much on his shoulders. I mean, clearly we saw in the first half of the season he can be that guy. You got to be able to adjust to when teams are starting to come at you and figure you out. You have to try to adjust and make better game planning, and I just don't think they give him much of a chance.
I think it's a fair counter. The issue that I have with it, Robbie, is that unfortunately the thing that the Niners have that the Seahawks won't and don't have is Kyle Shanahan. And Kyle Shanahan and his blocking schemes and what they do on the offensive line and the way that he generates the running game production is incredible, and it's genius. And he's a fantastic coach. The Seahawks have we talked about it earlier. They haven't got a cat in hell's chance of getting anybody from San Francisco to come and run Pete's offense. I think personally, Robbie, I would love nothing more than to go and get Mike LaFleur or Mike McDaniels or whoever they are and say, okay, you guys are coming in. You've got 5 years to prove that you're the heir apparent to Pete Carroll. You get to run the offense, bring the Kyle Shanahan offense to Seattle. Let's do it. You can be an assistant head coach if that helps seal the deal. Here's a big fat salary. Go and do it. And Pete wants to run the football, and they run the football brilliantly. I'd have do you know what? If that happened, you would see the most positive article on Seahawks Draft Blog that you have ever seen. I'll be on there saying, I have got this completely wrong. Well done, Pete Carroll. But we both know it ain't happening. And the guy that he brings in is probably not, they're not even approaching this with, we need somebody who's got amazing scheming and this guy with a track record of producing these kind of things that you're talking about there, Robbie, who can cook up an idea with some genius to keep Russell clean against Aaron Donald. They're going to just appoint someone who will do whatever it is that Pete Carroll wants to do. That's the wrong approach. And the whole thing for me is, I think if you really want Russell Wilson, if you're at the Seahawks and you're saying, we want Wilson, we're happy with Wilson, we're going to get, then what you're doing is you're appointing the offensive coordinator who can work best with Russell Wilson and what Russell Wilson wants to do on offense, and that they become like a little team in the same way that Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes are a team. That's what you should be doing. But Carroll's not doing that. He's bringing in an offensive coordinator to be a team with Pete. And that's a clash. And it doesn't make any sense to me to have a $35 million quarterback and then sort of force him to run a scheme he doesn't want to run, because I don't think he wants to run this, and say, Ross, we know you've got ideals of legacy and want to be in the same peerage as Aaron Rodgers and Patrick Mahomes, but actually what we want you to be is Ryan Tannehill or Baker Mayfield, please. Because that's just not going to work. And I think I'm starting to get to the point now, Robbie, where, Pete, if you're going to do this, man, do it, be all in. What's the sign say above the door? All in. You tap that sign yourself, man, and you make the trade and pull the trigger. Because if you want to play this way, then, and you're going to bring in a coordinator to do what you want to do, then have a quarterback earning $500,000 or $1 million or whatever a rookie gets who gets picked in the top 10, or have Alex Smith or Mariota or whoever, or Phillip Rivers, because there's just no point having your way and your scheme and your coordinator and saying to Russell, okay, Russell, work with this.
Yeah, I mean, again, I agree with you. The only thing that I think of is like if we do run Pete ball or whatever you want to call it, like there's got to be someone who can run it better. Like if Pete wants a certain way, doesn't mean he's calling the plays. We just need someone to run the scheme better. And I think that's where Shotty just failed. Like I said, everything took too long. It just wasn't the right fit. So get somebody who can come in and run Pete ball better. And you're right. I don't think Russ wants to run it that way. I think Russ wants to throw the ball every time. I think he wants to be in that legendary status of Mahomes and such. But really, I mean, Russ plays better off of play action. And if we can establish the run and get it going, Russ will have much more time to throw the football. And I think Pete's probably thinking if we play my way and we win and we get back to a Super Bowl, is Russ really going to care if he threw for, 5,000 yards? And I mean, he wants Super Bowls, right? As we all do. Not saying that's what's going to happen. I just hope they go out and get a coordinator that can plan and scheme better than what Schottenheimer did. Again, I'm not saying Pete's in this by any means. I think he does need to relinquish control, give it over to an offense coordinator to plan this. But I just think if they're going to do this, there's got to be someone out there that can run Pete ball better than Shotty did.
But a quick reminder that he wasn't going to replace Shotty. He didn't think Shotty was, as if you're going to believe, I believe Jason Lickenfor has put, his reporting on this story. He said that they were not planning to make a change until the philosophies were different. So in Pete's mind, it wasn't that Schottenheimer needed to go because he wasn't running Pete's scheme as well as could be. It was simply that he wasn't willing to run Pete's scheme.
Right, exactly. And then, I mean, that's the thing, though. I mean, if he's trying to, Shotty's scheme wasn't that good. I mean, to be honest, I mean, it was good for the first 5-6 games, but after that, it like once it got figured out, he couldn't adjust. And
but
so,
Pete was happy with it, though. I mean, that and he was going to keep it. And the problem now is that I think that the job description, Robbie, is to do what Brian Schottenheimer wouldn't do, which is just whatever Pete Carroll wants to do. The job description might as well say wanted, yes, man.
Right. I mean, and if you think about it, though, like we put up more points this year than we ever have as an offense. We had 2 receivers go over landmarks that we never had. DK broke Largent's record for receiving yards, and then Tyler caught 100 passes. There were a lot of positives in that, but that just only goes so far, right? And the second half collapse was just too much for me.
Just to sort of put a bow on the Wilson stuff before we move on. And look, I'm not saying that I think he is going to be traded this year. I'm not saying that. I think I would stand by the point I made about if Pete's going to go all in, I don't know why he doesn't take it to the max. But I just wonder, there are 2 teams, Robbie, that are picking 2nd and 3rd overall, and neither of them's getting Trevor Lawrence. So the Jets, New York, big market. He reeled someone's link there last time. Miami, big market. You could see, and Miami's the kind of one that I would keep an eye on in this whole thing, because I got an email today and there was a report, Robbie, that had flashed out one of these websites, the national websites that send you spam emails all the time, plugging their articles. And the name of the article was Tua Tagovailoa's potential doubted by Dolphins players after rookie year. So it seems like the Dolphins are not entirely convinced, and rightly so, because I thought Tua looked bang average, frankly, and I thought he did in Alabama. The Dolphins are close to competing. They're not a million miles away. They could easily have been in the playoffs this year. They have a lot of things going for them. What they don't necessarily have is a star quarterback. And they're now in a division with Josh Allen and the Bills. And if they want to, and they've seen the Bills could be in the Super Bowl this year, easily. They know that the pathway to getting there is not exactly a million miles away. They have the number 3 pick. They have, I think, pick number 18. I think they have an extra 2nd rounder as well, actually, Robbie, because of the Laramie Tunsil trade. And they have Tua Tagovailoa, who they could trade to get another pick. So they have the ammunition easily to make a move like this. And they were one of the teams being linked with Deshaun Watson when all that happened last week. I'm just wondering. I don't know if it's going to happen this year. But if hey, listen, there was a mutual philosophical difference between Shotty and Pete Carroll. If it would probably take a mutual philosophical difference between quarterback and coach to initiate this change. Like I said, not saying it's going to happen, but for the first time, Robbie, since 2012, I don't feel stupid talking about this.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the Jets would really. I don't think the Jets would happen, just for the simple fact. I mean, I know it's a big market, but remember, Russ has a no trade clause. It kind of dictates where he wants to go. I just don't see he would just look at that dumpster fire. I don't think he'd want to go there. Miami is interesting. I mean, you bring up a very interesting point about that. I would absolutely hate it if they traded for Tua, though. I think he just looked marginal. I don't think he has what we're looking for. I mean, he could probably manage the game, but I do like that number 3 pick, and I do like the idea of getting the number 18 pick. What I don't like is their ability to pick in the first round. So I think that kind of makes me nervous. But yeah, I mean, you could have your pick of one of the top 3 quarterbacks right there. I mean, if you get that pick and you could trade the 18 pick down to get a couple more picks. I mean, I'm not saying I hate it. I think the cap hit alone this year would make it tough, but I mean, it's definitely possible.
Yeah, I'm with you all the way on Tua. I would not want Tua as part of any deal. I'd almost be like, yeah, you can keep him. You can keep him, thanks. We'll have somebody else. I think that a deal. I don't want to get too. We would go too deep into the ocean of this if we start talking about specific compensation. But I would for 3 and 18 and a pick next year in 2022 as well. I think that could do it. Do the Dolphins have somebody who isn't Tua? And you have to be realistic about these things. Is there somebody on the roster that the Seahawks like? In the same way that Bradley McDougald went over to New York in the Adams trade, that they could bring over, who could start for them, play a role for them, something like that, potentially. And with 3, you have the choice. You can either go and take whoever's left between Zach Wilson or Justin Fields, or you could take Penei Sewell as a long-term left tackle option. You could play guard initially. Very easily, I think Sewell could play guard for a year or 2. You could trade down. I mean, you just could. I mean, I don't think they should, but they could. And then at 18, you could trade down, or you've got options. Whether that's an offensive lineman, whether it's a defensive end, whether it's Najee Harris, whether it's I could run through a whole bunch of names for you. Look, I'm not saying that. I want to see Russell Wilson playing like he was in the first 5 games of the season for Seattle. I want to see the Seahawks doing better in the postseason. I also want to see an offensive coordinator appointed who can do what he wants to do. We're not all going to get what we want, I'm afraid. So, just throwing it out there. I think it's. Mike Florio said in his piece, he's just kind of giving you the heads up. He's just kind of trying to give you where the ball is moving. I think with the word he used. I think we're just trying to do the same a little bit here. So, candidates to replace Shotty. Shane Steichen, you mentioned, who is, when his name was tweeted by Mike Garafolo, I can never pronounce his name properly, Robbie. I'm very sorry. Garafolo had to put another tweet out saying, "Don't shoot the messenger, Chargers fans. I'm just saying," which made me think, this guy sounds a little bit like he's as popular as Darrell Bevel was in Seattle. And then I read this article here, and it says, the Athletic's Daniel Popper has stated repeatedly that Steichen is regarded very highly within the Chargers building. This is technically his first season calling his own plays, but it has not gone well. Anthony Lynn has taken the brunt of the blame for the Chargers' various clock management issues, and rightfully so. But Steichen deserves a larger portion of blame than he's getting. As the offensive coordinator, he's responsible for calling the plays, and the Chargers' execution in situational football has suffered because of his play calling, specifically against the Bills and Falcons. Steichen shows glimpses of being a very creative and smart play caller, but when looking at this season as a whole, he has been inconsistent at best. The Chargers offense we all watched against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and New Orleans Saints is completely different than the one we saw on Sunday against the Broncos, or the one from a few weeks ago that couldn't move the ball against the Patriots. There is some debate as to how much of the vanilla play calling is due to Lynn's conservative philosophy, but it's still Steichen's responsibility to call a quality script. Tell me that ain't scary.
And it sounds just like Pete and Shotty, to be honest, right? I mean, kind of same situation.
I mean, that to me, it sounds so much. I mean, it's as if they read that piece and gave him a call, you know. And listen, he is the only name that has been linked, Robbie. And Garofalo has a source in Seattle. He has broken news with the Seahawks in the past. Schottenheimer's name was really the only one that was linked 3 years ago. And 3 days later, he got the job. And when his name came out, everyone went, no, not Brian Schottenheimer. Oh, well, hope not. And then 3 days later, it was him. It just feels inevitable that it's going to be Shane Steichen, in my opinion. There's not been a single other name that has been linked legitimately. I mean, what has happened is Jacina Anderson has tweeted 2 names out. But let's be right, she's looking after her guys by saying they may be considered. She's not saying they are being considered. She's saying they might be considered. I'd bet anything, that she's just doing those 2 guys a massive favor. And the 2 names are Pep Hamilton, who is the most overrated coach in football history, in my opinion, and Tony Elliott, the Clemson coordinator, defensive coordinator and running games coach. A couple of things on Tony Elliott. He is, I think, still the highest paid coordinator in college football. They paid a lot of money to keep him in Clemson. That was a big move by the powers that be at Clemson to tie him down. His contract is up, I think, in 2022. I'm not sure if that includes the 2022 season or not, but he's coming towards the end of that deal, Robbie. He hasn't taken any college head coaching jobs. Whether he's been offered any, I don't know. He has been linked with some in the past. He hasn't taken any of them. It's quite possible that he's the college version of Eric Bieniemy, who seems to get linked with every job and is a popular tout, but actually never gets any of the jobs. Tony Elliott also might be thinking, Trevor Lawrence is leaving. The backup quarterback played against Notre Dame. He did okay, but he ain't Trevor Lawrence. And the expectation at Clemson now is national championships every year. That's the standard. He might think, I need to get out and go and get another job before I have to handle a new quarterback and the post-Trevor Lawrence era begins. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if Jacina Anderson is putting his name out there for that reason. And with Pep Hamilton, he's with the Chargers as well, and they're just about to appoint somebody else. So there's a chance that he will be on the out too. So I'm not buying that these 2 guys are actually on the radar, but I am buying that Shane Steichen is.
I mean, I don't hate the idea of the Clemson offensive coordinator. I mean, it seems like he'd be a good fit. Here's the thing with the Chargers offensive coordinator. Like, I like the fact that he has some sort of creativity. I don't like that article very much, just for the simple fact that, I mean, it sounds like the same situation that we had with Pete and Shotty, that he was just kind of like, okay, he'll do whatever, Anthony Lynn said. But as long as if he can run Pete ball better than Shotty can and can get us some first down to get the ball moving, then I'm okay with it. I don't know enough about him to really pass judgment. I do like hearing the creativity side. So looking at the positive thing, that's one thing I think Shotty lacked was creativity. So I'm really hoping that that this guy can come in and do that. One of the things in that Mike Florio, Chris Sims saying that you played, Chris Sims said, like, it was so Brian Schottenheimer's offense was so predictable that he was calling every single play, and that DK screen pass, he was like, oh, like everyone knew where it was going, and that's why the guy jumped the route, because he knew exactly what they were doing. We were so predictable. We have to get away from that. We have to get away from being that predictable. And I think that's why Russ had, a lot of issues. And, he can take a lot of the blame too, because, I mean, he spent so much time rolling around in the pocket, but I think he kind of has to, for the simple fact that the routes took so long to develop, and they're trying to take the shots downfield in 2-man coverage and just wasn't there. They have to be more creative. So hopefully this Steve guy, if he gets the job, can come in, run. If he's going to run Pete's ball, run it better than Shotty did, and get real creative.
I guarantee that, everybody's going to call him Steve Steichen, by the way. His name is Shane Steichen. I'd never heard of him until this link.
Shane Steichen.
I mean, I think that the problem with that is, with him is if he is appointed, Robbie, I guarantee somebody's going to say, well, Justin Herbert had a great rookie year. What people don't realize is that Darrell Bevell was the coordinator when Russell Wilson had his rookie year as well. And nobody gives Darrell Bevell any credit for Russell Wilson breaking or equaling Peyton Manning's rookie touchdown total. But, so that was nothing to do with Bevell. That was all Wilson. But now that we're appointing an offensive coordinator who helped Justin Herbert, that's not Justin Herbert, it was Shane Steichen. So this is, people will twist anything to fit any agenda. I agree with you that the offense wasn't diverse or creative enough. And again, all I will say is, if Pete Carroll had fired Schottenheimer for that, I'd have been saying, well done, Pete. But he was happy to keep Schottenheimer. The only reason that they've parted is because Schotty doesn't want to be here anymore, because he doesn't want to run Pete's offense, which is the concerning thing. And they looked like they'd ran out of plays after the first drive against the Rams. They had no answers whatsoever. And what I want to see, Robbie, and is it too much to ask that when you watch the Patriots play, look, I hate comparing to the Patriots. They have the greatest coach who has ever lived. But when you watch the Patriots play, Robbie, 1 week, they'll run the ball 50 times because that's what the game dictates. Then the next week, they'll run it 5 times and throw it 50 times because that's what the game dictates. Is it so bad to want an offense that is going to tailor itself to winning the game, whatever it takes? If it's throwing, it's throwing. If it's running, it's running. You aren't predictable if you don't know what a team's going to do every week. If you're just going to trot out there and say, this is what we are, which is what Pete Carroll is saying, and we're going to be this, and that's what we're going to do, then you become very, very predictable. And again, it comes down to the man at the top. He is making this team. Shotty could have been more creative, yes. But I put it on Pete, because if he's not willing to cede control to a coach who can be creative and flexible and provide the offense that is going to deliver the kind of productive season that Russell Wilson needs to help this team put points on the board and not live with, well, if we have to win 17-14, we're going to do it, because I'm comfortable with that. I mean, Pete, how often does Pete say that these days? He says it in practically every press conference. I'm happy with 17-14. I'm happy with 20 points to 17. You have Russell Wilson. What's wrong with being happy with 35-14? I mean, we saw they could put 30 points on the board with this quarterback earlier in the season. There's no reason to have this approach. So I don't know, man. I'm not excited about this at all. I'm anticipating Shane Steichen's arrival, and we'll see. But if I'm wrong, I will happily admit that I'm wrong. Let's talk about something else, Robbie. Let's move on to a different topic. Free agency. There are going to be, I think, there's 4 main free agents this contracts are expiring this offseason. If I've missed anybody that you think I should be talking about, please chuck them on the list as well. For me, it's Chris Carson, Shaquille Griffin, KJ Wright, and Ethan Posick are the main ones because they've all started, they've all played a lot of snaps. I want to run through each one and get your thoughts on whether they should stay or go, or if there's kind of a range where you would be comfortable with them staying, a price range. So let's start with Chris Carson. How do you feel about Big Chris being back or not?
Yeah, for a while now that I know, and not because I don't like Chris. I just think that I just don't think we need a guy that can't stay healthy, and he gets injured quite a bit, and we need someone that's going to be reliable. And this is where I'd like to see us spend a 2nd round pick on a big back that hopefully can stay healthy and such. And Chris does a lot for this team. He does, the offense will go through him. But I think if we're going to run Pete ball, I just don't think he's the guy, for the simple fact that I just don't think he can stay healthy. And then plus not only that, he did have that fumbling problem, 2 years ago, which became a really big issue. So if you bring him back, it's got to be a cheap contract, like a 1 year, $4 million. It can't be a long-term extension.
I personally have kind of gone from one side of this to the other, Robbie, throughout the year. And I think that he's done. I think the only way that he's back is if the market is so cold that he has very little choice but to come back. I think he's been injured every year. He's he was injured in college. He's just a player who gets a lot of injuries. And he's clearly immensely talented. He's got the talent to be a top 5 running back in this league. But whereas the Vikings can rely on Dalvin Cook and the Titans can rely on Derrick Henry and the Saints can rely on Alvin Kamara, you just can't rely on Chris Carson. You never know when he's going to get healthy. And they had to spend half a season babying him and limiting his snaps to get him to the postseason. You can't, if you're going to be a team that is physical, smash mouth, run the ball, you can't have a running back who's always on the brink of either being injured and missing a whole hunk of time, or you have to manage his snaps, Robbie. I mean, it's just not, it can't happen anymore. So I think what will happen is they'll let him test free agency and he will go to the market. And if the offers are low, I think he will do what a lot of players do when the offers are low, and he will go somewhere else for similar money that the Seahawks are offering, because players often do, don't they? They kind of just have a change of scenery and they go and play somewhere else when they don't get the offer that they want for the team they're with. So we've seen that plenty of times over the years with the Seahawks. So I think that's what will happen. And I think the only way it doesn't happen is if like the Seahawks are the only ones offering him, X amount, and he decides, well, I'm not going to cut my nose off to spite my face. I'll go back. But I do think he will move on. And I think it's imperative that the Seahawks get a running back. They need a star running back. It really pissed me off watching Nick Chubb the other day again, Robbie, because we've talked about this recently. Why the hell did they not just draft Nick Chubb? I mean, and people could say, second guessing, it's hindsight, it's this, that, and the other. No, we've been through this. If you typed into a machine all of the physical attributes that the Seahawks want in a running back, from size, height, weight, height, weight, they're kind of the same things. Height, weight, explosive traits, vertical, broad, 40, style of runner, attitude, personality, and then you put all them into the machine and you press go, then out on the conveyor belt is delivered a fresh Nick Chubb. So how on earth did they talk themselves out of this? And I don't know if you saw the tweets the other day. So Jim Nagy, who used to be with the Seahawks, tweets out, hell of a lot of teams who regret passing on Nick Chubb. And Lance Zierlein, who was very well connected, and I've had a chance to sort of talk to a couple of times over the years, says, I know one team in particular, or we both know one team in particular who regret not taking Nick Chubb. And then he posts a picture of a Penny, Rashad Penny. He was talking about the Seahawks. So internally, the Seahawks know they effed that one up, Robbie. And it really, really, really pissed me off when I saw that tweet from Lance Zierlein. I spent a good hour just ranting at my wife about the fact they're not taking Nick Chubb. She doesn't even know who Nick Chubb is. She's never heard of him. But she was hearing that because she was there. So I just couldn't believe it that they didn't take the guy who was tailor-made for this offense. And if he's here now, we don't have to think about running backs for the next 5-6 years. They've got their Marshawn. So they need that guy. They need running backs don't matter. Yeah. There'll be somebody who will be feeling that. This offense, with the way that Pete wants to play, he needs a reliable stud running back. They've got to go and get one.
Yeah, I felt the same way about Jonathan Taylor. He was a guy who wanted to play in Seattle. He said he wanted to play for Pete Carroll. Like, he likes the Seahawks, and I felt like he was, he put up like 1,200 yards this year. I think, as a rookie, I think this is a guy that people were, high on, and for some reason we just didn't go out and get him either. And it's just another guy that we probably should have drafted. And now we're in a situation where we're going to have to make a decision, on Chris Carson, and we're going to have to go draft a running back. So. Yeah, I mean, how great would Nick Chubb look in the Seahawks offense, though, man? It'd be great.
It would be perfect. I mean, just the idea of Nick Chubb running the ball, and it almost feels when you look at him, Robbie, and you look at his style of runs and the size and it. I kind of like watching him run in Cleveland. His uniform changes to a dark blue as he's running, and you're thinking he should be in Seattle. He shouldn't be in Cleveland. And it really winds me up that Cleveland. So the Carroll wants this kind of an offense, right? Carroll wants to run the ball and he wants to do all these things, right, Robbie? And like they go and sign BJ Finney, and they go, oh well, we've cut Justin Britt, but we won't do anything at center. We'll give Ethan Posick a go, and we'll sign Carlos Hyde for $2 million. And And Brandon Shell from the Jets for 2-3 million. That's what we're going to do. And then you look at Cleveland and they're like, well, we're going to sign Jack Conklin, and we're going to sign Kareem Hunt, and we're going to draft Nick Chubb, and we're going to spend our first round pick on an offensive lineman, and we're going to re-sign Joel Bitonio and JC Tretter. So we're going to have the offense that you wish you had, and we're going to do all of the moves that you probably should have done to have the offense that you wanted. And short of Jedrick Wills, who was obviously a very high pick last year, Robbie, the Seahawks could have had Chubb, Hunt, Tretter, Bitonio, Conklin. They could have had every single one of them, but they don't. They just don't. How? I just don't get it. Cleveland have shown it's not hard to build an offense like this. Just do what they've done. It was staring you right in the face.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how else to say about it, man. You're right. I mean, their defense or their offense is running exactly how we want to go right now, and they just won a playoff game, and we haven't. So yeah, I mean, they're still in it. So yeah, let's move on to the next free agent. Who else were you talking about?
Let's get a Shaquille Griffin.
Go. Pass. I just don't think I think a team's going to come in and pay him too much, and I don't think we'll be able to match it. And I'm going to say pass. Let him go.
My thought is, I think that they, okay, so to go back a few years, Michael Lombardi wrote an article. I actually think it was a podcast. Either way, I got the quote off, and he was talking about the time just before Richard Sherman left Seattle. And he said he was surprised that Seattle paid Sherman because the construction of that scheme is that you don't pay cornerbacks. You plug them in, you move them on, and you don't have to pay big money at that position. And Lombardi's point was they probably felt they had to pay Sherman because it was immediately after the Super Bowl. He'd become a star player. Understandable. I mean, Christ, you can't criticize the Seahawks for paying Richard Sherman. So that's what happened with that. But ultimately, he thought they're going to move Sherman on and they're going to go back to what they were doing before. And I think that's how they will approach this, Robbie, now. I don't think they're going to pay big money at the cornerback position. I think he is doubling down on his vision, and his vision is not to pay loads of money at cornerback. So I think unless Shaquille Griffin his market is totally cold and they can get him for a much smaller price than everybody's thinking, then, and look, it could happen. Jadeveon Clowney was supposed to be earning $21 million a year this year, and he didn't get it. And I don't think anybody thought Jermaine Ifedi would get the veteran minimum, even if they didn't rate him, they didn't think he was going to get the vet minimum. So it's possible that these players get less, but I think you're right. He'll get more, and I think he will move on. And then the question is, Robbie, is how do you replace him? Now, I've told you, and I think you agree, that we'd like to see Richard Sherman come back. And I think as long as it isn't ridiculous money, if it was $8 million, $10 million for a season, I would be. There doesn't have to be that. I'm just throwing it out there. I'd rather have the guy because I think he's physical, sets the tone. I know he didn't play much this year, but when he did play against the Rams, it was bloody brilliant. And it's Sherm, and he knows the scheme, and I think they need him. And I think it's time. I think he feels there's an epiphany to be, there's a come together moment to have, and I hope it happens, Robbie.
Yeah, 100% agree. I want Sherm back, and I think it's just the stars align on this one, and it makes too much sense. So yeah, go out and go get him. Like, I just hope he doesn't follow, the defensive coordinator for the Niners to wherever he goes to be the head coach. I hope he doesn't follow him. I hope he comes home because he belongs in Seattle.
Yeah, I think as long as you hope that Robert Saleh goes to Detroit, then there's not much chance of Sherm going there. But I don't know, if he ended up in Philadelphia, maybe it could happen. I think the one thing we have to remember with Sherm is Sherm's a different cat. And if he had the chance to come back to Seattle, I think that would mean more than money to Richard Sherman. I think I'm not saying he'd come for free or anything. I'm just saying that I think the idea of coming back and getting his reputation within sort of the framework of the Seahawks back on track and finishing his career where he wants to be, and finishing a legend in Seattle. Because I don't think he wants to finish with the rival Niners. I mean, I think he wants to come back to Seattle, finish, have his jersey hung up in the top of the stadium, have the statue of the tip built outside the front door, and that's what we all want. So let's make it happen. KJ Wright, I would love to see KJ Wright come back, Robbie, but KJ Wright has already made it abundantly clear that if you want him back, you're going to have to pay him. He was on $10 million this year, and he had a great season. Now, when he was a free agent 2 years ago, his market was surprisingly quiet and he came back. But I'm wary of there being a deal to be done there when you now have Gus Bradley in Las Vegas. You now have Dan Quinn in Dallas. You potentially have Robert Saleh going somewhere else. And if any of these teams have decent cap money, I would want to have KJ Wright as one of my leaders in the locker room. And I think given that they spent a first-round pick on a linebacker just a year ago, I think there's a chance he may move on.
I disagree. I actually think that he will be back. I think what will probably end up happening is his market will be cold again. Not because KJ is not a great player. I think a lot of people within the organization and even in the NFL know KJ is a great player, but I don't think they're going to want to pay that much money to an aging linebacker. I just don't see it being a thing. I mean, this is why his market was cold 2 years ago. I think they see him as an aging linebacker, and I just don't think, he probably will fit a lot of people's scheme, but I just don't think people will want to pay that much money for him. So I think what will end up happening, he'll come back either on a 1 or 2 year deal and then he'll end up retiring a Seahawk. I think that's what will happen.
I also think the other thing that we have to take into account with this is that they don't have that much money to spend. And if they're going to bring in, say, Richard Sherman, and if they're going to, look, if they want to do this properly and they want to put an O-line out there to beat Aaron Donald, then they have to prioritize getting some people who can do that. And that doesn't mean Mike Yapati on $2 million. That means if they have the potential to go and get Brandon Scherf or Joe Thuney, whatever it is, they should go and do it. And Alex Mack at center. They should go and do these things rather than scrimping and saving on the O-line and then hoping for the best. They should just plow resources into it and have the best, most experienced, most expensive O-line that money can buy, Robbie. And if they're going to do that, then I think you have to make a sacrifice somewhere. And you've spent a first-round pick on Jordan Brooks. So if they'd have spent that first-round pick on Jonathan Taylor, we're having a different conversation because they've sought the running back and Jonathan Taylor can do that role that we're talking about somebody else doing this year. And they bring KJ to play next to Bobby again. But they brought in Jordan Brooks, and Carroll is waxing lyrical about the way that Brooks played. I just wonder whether or not it'll end up being one of those where, as badly as you want him back, you might just not be able to do it.
I think what you end up doing is you end up taking the money that you gave like Greg Olsen and you use it for KJ. I just don't think they'll let him go. I really don't. I just think that there's money that we have paid this year players who are non-contributors, and I think we'll probably give him the same kind of deal that he got, like a 2 year, $14 million, average 7. I think that's probably what it'll be. I think we can make it happen.
Well, so let me ask you this then, before we move on from KJ. So we've got $7 million from Greg Olsen. Let's say let's add another 5 million on from somewhere. Would you rather that 7 million go towards getting an absolutely top draw offensive lineman to play the way that you want to play, to have a better chance of stopping Aaron Donald, or would you rather that money go on KJ Wright?
No, I would rather go offensive line. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that. I'm telling what I think is going to happen. I'm not what I want to have happen.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I don't know. We'll see what happens. I love KJ Wright. I would love to see him back next year. I think he's everything that you want in a Seal. But we'll see. We'll see. He's already making it clear that he wants to get paid. Ethan Posick, I'm ready to. I think people don't realize that Ethan Posick maybe struggled a bit more than has been made out in the media. Don't think it was truly a liability, Robbie, but he was the only one on the offensive line who got really bad PFF grades this year. I thought that at times he was overwhelmed. I thought he started off well enough, but as they changed the offense to be a little bit more, I'd say conservative, a bit more tentative, I thought that down the stretch, he wasn't as good. And if there was a chance to get somebody in that role who was either a really talented rookie, and they missed on some really good talented rookies over the last few years at that position, which I wish they would have taken, or if they just go and bring in an offensive lineman like Alex Mack, who's very experienced, I would rather do that.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's gone. I don't think they bring him back. I think he struggled too much. And, he during the earlier part of the season, I thought he played pretty decent. And, I was pleasantly surprised, but I think ultimately he will be gone.
And then apart from that, I mean, I say they haven't got loads to spend. It really depends what they do and if there's any way to create some space. I mean, I personally think, Robbie, that they kind of have to do something. Yeah, I don't think you can go into the offseason with as little money as they've got and with 4 draft picks, one of which is a 7th rounder, and think that you can get everything done that you need to do. I think I don't know what they're going to do. I mean, they have options. I mean, frankly, I'd be open to trading Jamal Adams. I don't think Jamal Adams is worth $18 million a year in Seattle's scheme. I think people have got carried away with the sacks because the Seahawks put him in a position to get those sacks by making him a free runner to the quarterback, by taking A-gap pressure from Bobby Wagner to try and suck people in there. So they have to ward off against that and have to focus their attention in protection to Bobby Wagner. And then they have Jamal Adams coming off the edge. I think you could put anybody in that position and they would get a decent amount of sacks. I think it was something like 8% of his sacks, 8% of his blitzes led to sacks, which means 92% of his blitzes did not lead to sacks. I think that, and he was blitzing more than any other player in the league by far. So I think that it's all manufactured production. I think that he does make some good plays, such as the play where he came across the line, tackled Darrell Henderson as he was going in for a touchdown, saved a touchdown against the Rams. Fantastic play. Not saying he's a bad player, just saying that I don't think he's worth $18 million a year and 2 first-round picks and a 3rd-round pick and a player for him and a 4th. So for me, I would be, if you ain't trading Russell Wilson to Miami, I'm ringing Miami up and saying, how do you want Jamal Adams for number 18 this year? And I would take that. I know it's 1 less pick, but it's 5 picks higher than you would have picked this year because they would have had the number 23 pick. And I think that would be a fair trade, maybe with something thrown in next year, like a 3rd in 2022. I would take that right now. And he's had injuries, Robbie, and I think he's a better fit in that New England defensive kind of scheme that Flores runs down in Miami. So that's what I would do. I don't think they will do that at all, but I think somehow they have to create money and or picks.
I mean, you and I have talked a lot about, Jamal Adams off our podcast, and you and I have disagreed on this, but I'm starting to come on your side on this. I think you're right. I think maybe it's time to go ahead and get the draft capital back. And as much as I do like Jamal Adams and the player he is, and I know people were upset, by how he played or whatever in the postseason, but I mean, the guy's a warrior, goes out and he gives it his all. And I know we generated a lot of sacks for him by just blitzing him so many times, but I mean, he is an incredible football player. He's a liability in coverage, but yeah, I think it's probably time to go ahead and just call it a wash. And I mean, I would love the 18th pick from Miami, trade it and hopefully you can get something else back, not just that pick, because, like you said, we gave up 2 firsts, a 3rd, and a player. So hopefully we can either get another player back, 18th, and maybe a 3rd or something. I mean, I'd like that, but who knows? I mean, because he's coming off the injuries, and he's going to have off-season surgery. I have a hard time thinking that a team's going to want to really take that risk. So I think we're kind of stuck in the situation that we are with him. And I don't know if we'll even try to extend him this year. We'll see.
I just don't understand what the plan is with him, Robbie. I mean, when they traded for him, I think I thought it was a desperate move. I'm not going to go over that again. I thought it was a desperate move because they've not been able to bring anybody in on the defense. Their most significant addition was Quinton Dunbar, and he was at the time dealing with all of his issues in Florida about whether he was going to be arrested or charged or whatever it was, or put in jail. So, they had to do something. They weren't going to get Jadeveon Clowney back. They lost him. So they're not added any impact players. And, Jordan Brooks was their first round pick and he wasn't expected to start. So they had to do something, and they did it. They went and spent a lot of picks on Jamal Adams, and it was clearly a seller's market with the price that they paid. But by not paying him a contract straight away, they must have known that this will only get more expensive the longer this goes on. Budda Baker then signs a contract worth just under $15 million a year. That then sets the absolute floor for where Jamal Adams' contract is going to be. It's $15 million as an absolute bare minimum. And because of Tunsil and because of Ramsey resetting the markets after their picks, we know it's not going to be $15 million. It's probably going to be at, I would guess 18. And I don't think you can spend $18 million a year on Wagner, $18 million a year on Adams, and $35 million a year on Russell Wilson and have three players taking up $75 million of your cap space. I don't think you can do that. I don't think you can do that. And I think you have to be open to moving this guy and just saying, okay, we took a chance to get us over the top in 2020. We're going to get what we can back. If it's 18 and a third round pick in 2022, do it. The other thing to bear in mind is someone like Miami, they would not have been able to trade for Jamal Adams last season because he was with the Jets. And there's no way that they were going to trade him to a division rival. But now you've kind of added a middleman here. It would be a great fit for the Dolphins. He would fit in that scheme perfectly. They have 2 first-round picks. So if let's say they believe in Tua Tagovailoa, let's actually say that all this talk about them not believing in him, they believe they've got their quarterback. They've got a lot of other pieces. They could draft a receiver in the first round, a Jamar Chase or a Devontae Smith, for example, and they could have Jamal Adams. Now, for me, that would be perfect for Miami as a first-round double dip. Do I think the Seahawks will even consider that? No. But then I don't understand what direction they're going in, Robbie. Because if you end up paying him $18 million and Wagner 8, you're going to really limit how much money you have elsewhere to spend on other people, and you're not going to have any stock in the draft this year, and you're not going to have a first-round pick next year. And I don't think the defense is a perfect fit for Jamal Adams. Good player, very passionate about the game. If you said to me that we could make a trade with the Dolphins now and sign Keanu Neal instead, done deal. I'll shake your hand right now.
Oh, yeah, I'd be all over that. I love Keanu Neal. That guy is awesome. So, yeah, I'd be all over that for sure. And, we've got a lot of decisions to make, like you said. And I got one for you, Rob, that I'm interested to hear your thoughts on. David Moore. Do you re-sign him or no?
Wow. You've got to establish the David Moore. I think that's one of the lessons from 2020 season is that if you are not establishing David Moore in your passing game, then you are not doing it right. No, what I would like to see, Robbie, and I know this is the thing about the Seahawks is, there's like the list of things I'd like to see are growing and growing. I want to see investment in the offensive line, because if they're going to play this way, you might as well do it right. I want to see them add to the defense. I want to see them get a running back. I want to see them get a really dynamic number 3. I want to, and they don't have the draft stock to do this. If they had the picks that they had last year, so that's a first and 2 seconds, what I would be saying right now is that they should probably spend one of them on an offensive lineman. They should probably spend one of them on a running back, and they should probably spend one of them on someone like Elijah Moore or Tutu Atwell, or one of these really dynamic guys who can operate in the slot, who can create easy separation over the middle, can get down a seam, can go on out routes to the corner. They can do anything like this, run to the sideline, run across the formation, do jet sweeps, do the kind of things that you want David Moore to be able to do, but just at a better level. And these guys can run fast, and they're physical, and for their size, and they're explosive. And that's what I would want, Robbie. I would want to go down that road. Now, the problem is they don't have all of this stock, and they don't have loads of money. And if they're going to spend money on this, and this, how are they then going to be able to spend money on a really good slot receiver? So I don't know. I mean, if you said to me, would you rather have David Moore, or would you rather have no additions to the receiver group at all? Then I'd rather have David Moore back. Because I don't think Freddie Swain and John Ursua, who they've just signed to a futures contract, are the answer. And I don't think another 7th rounder on a receiver is the answer either. But at the same time, I kind of feel like you need more than David Moore. It feels like they need a number 3, a proper number 3 that they clearly wanted because they signed Josh Gordon and he didn't play a down all year, and they tried to sign Antonio Brown.
Right, and don't forget they picked up Philip Dorsett as well, so they were hoping that they would get something out of him. So yeah, I could see them. I don't think he'll be a super expensive free agent sign. I think they'll probably try to get him back on a cheap deal. But I was just curious your thoughts on him.
And with regards to the draft, there's about 20 players, Robbie, that I could single out that I really like for the Seahawks, or I think could fill holes. I think that you will be really pushed to find a better fit than Javonte Williams, the North Carolina running back, for the way that he runs, the tackles that he breaks is just phenomenal. Just the yards after contact is unbelievable. Now, I don't think he's got that look in his eye that Marshawn and Chris Carson had, which I think is something that kind of Pete Carroll kind of looks for. And yes, Nick Chubb has it as well. But Williams has just got this real toughness about him, Robbie. He runs like a Seahawks running back. And I know that teams are viewing him anywhere between round 2 and round 4. I think he's probably at the higher end of that. But I think that the Seahawks could easily fall for this guy. And I think one of the things about the running back position is you've got to get cheap talent. It's better to have someone on cheap for 4 years of club control than spend money on running backs in free agency. I mean, I don't even think Carlos Hyde was worth the $2.75 million that the Seahawks spent on him this year. But if you can get somebody for $800,000 to run the ball for you a year on a rookie deal, then it's worth it. And you can get massive value for money because they can start quickly. They just have to learn pass protection. And some of them know how to do it already. So I would love to see Javonte Williams coming in. Aaron Banks is the other guy I think could really fit for what they want. Robbie at left guard. But I've kind of got to say, the more and more I think about it, I like the idea of veteran offensive linemen who can come in and pound some guys up front. That's probably not the term that I was actually looking for, pound some guys up front. But, I be physical and win the line of scrimmage is what I was meant to say. This is where you're supposed to come in, Robbie, and bail me out, not laughing in the background.
Sorry,
leave me hanging.
I had to leave you hanging on that one. It's too good. Yeah, I mean, I after you posted that article about Williams, I went back and watched the tape that you put on there. Man, that guy looks good. I really like him. I think he runs hard. He has a good hole. Like, look, he get good vision and can see the hole really well. So, I mean, that'd be a guy I'd be really excited about. I have a hard time. I really have a hard time actually envisioning them drafting a running back that early for the simple fact that I think they're just a little gun shy from drafting Rashad Penny that high and not working out. So the only way I could actually see it working is if maybe they decided this year that they trade Penny and don't re-sign Carson and go out and maybe grab a veteran running back, maybe re-sign Carlos Hyde to bring him back and then grab a guy like Williams. I think that would be awesome. I could see them doing something like that.
I would take a 6th rounder for Rashad Penny right now. And just move him and get a pick, because I just don't think. I think let somebody else see if they can get him back to health and see if they can get something out of him in his contract year. I just don't see. It kind of feels like it's just not going to happen for him in Seattle, and just get a pick for him of any description. And it's funny that I think they turned down a 3rd rounder for him after his rookie year, didn't they? From Detroit, probably should have just took it now. Nick Chubb. So yeah, I think we've kind of touched on everything that needs to be talked about. Just one final question, Robbie. Who do you think will win the Super Bowl? And who do you want to win the Super Bowl?
I think the Chiefs will probably end up winning the Super Bowl. Who do I want to win the Super Bowl? I can tell you who I don't want to win the Super Bowl. I don't want the Rams to do it. No, I think I kind of wouldn't mind seeing Buffalo win it, to be honest. I think that would be fun, just for the simple fact that I remember when they lost 4 in a row, so it would be cool to see that happen for them. I think that would be fun. I think Cleveland's a fun kind of cool story, but I just, for some reason, Baker Mayfield kind of bothers me, so I don't know if I really want to see him win in the Super Bowl.
I was going to say exactly the same thing that you just said. I think Kansas City probably will win it, and this will be the beginning of probably a a Patrick Mahomes dynasty, Andy Reid dynasty. I want Buffalo to win. I just like they're a fan base who are, they turn out in the snow. They love their team, very passionate. They're not a big market. They've not had a lot of success. I just like everything about the Bills. And I like Josh Allen, I like watching Josh Allen play. I like their head coach. They kicked Seattle's ass. And, I just remember watching that game and thinking, oh, why can't the Seahawks do this to anybody? They gave us a real kicking in that game. So I want the Bills to win it. And I would have said Cleveland. It's just Baker Mayfield is just a bit too much of a douche. So no. So go Bills, essentially. I'm not sure when we're going to get together and do another podcast because increasingly there's going to be not much to talk about. I'm no doubt we will jump on if there is anything big to talk about in the Seahawks world. However, I just wanted to thank you, Robbie, for the hours that you have put into this throughout the year. And that also comes with the territory of having to listen to me droning on for hours as well. So kudos to you for putting up with it for this long, for a whole season. I know that the listeners and the viewers to this podcast have really appreciated your input and often the sunlight that you have shown from the miserable Yorkshireman across from you giving his opinions. So thank you very much for being part of this podcast. It has been a pleasure, and I hope you've enjoyed it a little bit as well, even if the Seahawks season ended a little bit earlier.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I thought it was going to.
No, I did. And I really appreciate you letting me come on and do this. It's been great. And I hope to be back next year for you. And this is super fun for me. And, you talked about the passion of the Bills, and I learned quickly how passionate those Bills fans are. Because after our podcast, I predicted the Seahawks to win, and I got absolutely ridiculed by the Bills fans. So, yeah, I mean, this has been a lot of fun for me. I have a hard time going back and watching these and such and reading comments, but it's been really fun. And I really appreciate the opportunity. So thanks.
And I'd like to thank everybody who's watched it as well. The channel is going to stay active. So I've done some interviews. I've done an interview there's already an interview on there with Milton Williams. Check that out. He's a great guy. You're going to love it. He's a Seahawks fan. He's LA Tech defensive lineman. He's going to be in the draft. I've done an interview with Aleem McNeil, who is from NC State. He's going to go very high in the draft. That will be online a little bit later this week, maybe Thursday or Friday. And again, you're going to love that one. There's more of these planned. I'm going to try and speak to Jim Nagy before the Senior Bowl. I'm going to do a lot of interviews during the draft series over the next few weeks and next 2 or 3 months. So please stay tuned for that. Seahawks Draft Blog, it is, I said it the other day, no other team has a website dedicated to the offseason. So get involved in the comment section. Let us know what you think. Join in the discussion. It might not be the most exciting offseason in the world, but it's never dull with the Seahawks, is it? You never quite know what's around the corner. Thank you for watching. Enjoy the rest of your week. We'll see you soon.